Revenge films.
My name is Jessica. I had a fellow mom friend named Rachel, and she was a very wealthy fellow mom. Back when she was a student, she was apparently right in the city that was the hardest hit in a massive earthquake and went through a really difficult time. So nowadays at her parents' house, she has all the necessary goods for evacuation in all cases of an emergency. If you're asking how amazing her preparations were, she already has 10 large tents placed in the backyard so that people could come out and take refuge there in the event of an evacuation. Her backyard was also the size of about 5 normal houses and had normal backyards, and it even had a male and female toilet installed in the backyard. It was to the point where government officials would often stop by and gaze at it multiple times. However, Rachel was generous, and she had, of course, told people around her, but also the people in the local government office, that in the event of an emergency, people were more than welcome to come over and evacuate on her property. One day, the weather was a disaster and the heavy rain didn't stop. The winds only started to pick up, and from there, people living in a certain part of the town were told that they needed to self-evacuate to the nearest school or the nearest community center. There was a big commotion around the neighborhood, but Rachel's house sat on top of a hill, so it wasn't nearly affected by the rains, and there was certainly no flooding. So there were a lot of people who went there to evacuate. I lived in the high-rise apartment building, so I didn't need to evacuate, but I received messages from Rachel that day that because there were so many people that came to evacuate in her place, she didn't have enough hands to help, so she was asking me to come help her. So my husband and I jumped into the car and headed towards Rachel's house. When we got to Rachel's house, my husband was taking care of the kids, while I got to work volunteering around Rachel's house. Because the weather outside was really bad, they couldn't pitch tents in the yard, and there were people overflowing Rachel's house. Within that, there were people whose houses had already been flooded, and without any hesitation, Rachel was passing out various food supplies and beverages that she was storing in case of an emergency. Because some of the other moms from the preschool also evacuated there, they were all just happy just to have their kids in a safe place, and the other moms just got up and helped to pass out warm soup to the children and to the elderly. And then everybody ended up staying overnight. However, when the morning came around, the weather had made a turn for the better, and everybody was able to return to their homes. Everything should have been fine, but that was when the big problem occurred. While everybody was heading back towards their houses after evacuating there, because so many people had arrived, and they came into the house after being in the rain and the mud to evacuate, Rachel's house was pretty destroyed with all the mud everywhere. Within the people who had evacuated there was someone who said they wanted to thank Rachel for providing a safe place for them and their families, and some of them stayed behind to volunteer and help clean up Rachel's house to the very last corner. But then, one of the volunteers suddenly went over to Rachel's to get her and bring her attention to a certain part of the house. And then, when we went over there, for some reason, the toilet was broken, and the windows and the bed sheets, and all over the bedroom were destroyed, almost as if someone purposely smeared mud everywhere. This is awful. No matter how hard you tried, none of this should have gotten dirty. It's obvious that the mud was thrown onto the bed purposely as well. And plus, look over there on the sofa of the room. And this room only had so much mud over it that it wouldn't even be able to sit down. Because Rachel had experienced disaster herself and had a lot of regrets about it, she had prepared all kinds of things so that people could help around the community. Otherwise, she wouldn't have prepared 10 large tents, and there also would have been no need for her to prepare some sort of toilets outdoors either. Of course, if you say she has the money to do it, then that might be true, but it wasn't something that anybody would be able to do. It required a lot of care for those around you. And I was irritated that, even though she was helping the community this much, how anybody could possibly do that to her house. Because we were all regular people, and there was only so much that we could clean, in the end, we hired a contractor to come and clean the sofa and bed in the areas that we couldn't get to. That day, a group of us stayed until late into the evening to clean the house, and we thanked Rachel and finally were able to get back to our houses. However, that night, I received a phone call from Rachel. She said that there was something she wanted to talk to me about, so I decided to go back to her house once again. When I arrived to Rachel's home, she was sitting inside and looked deeply upset. "What's the matter, Rachel?" Without saying a word, Rachel pulled out a safety box that clearly held her valuable items in it. And then, when you looked at it at first class, you wouldn't be able to know. When I looked more closely, the lock was broken and everything inside had been stolen. "Inside of this box, I have safely kept jewels that were my grandmother's heirlooms, and also, I watched that I inherited from my grandfather." "What? Have you told the police about it yet?" "I haven't said anything, and plus, I was the one that invited everybody over into my house, so..." "No, we have to tell the police about this!" "But that also means that I have to suspect every single person that came over. And there were a lot of people going in and out of my house yesterday as well, and I don't remember every single person's face either." "That's a good point. because she had opened up her doors for anybody that needed to evacuate yesterday. There were a lot of people whose faces I had never seen before. It made me realize that she had a point that might be difficulty for us to pinpoint any suspect. However, Rachel lost 2 heirlooms from her grandparents, and I could tell that she was really upset about it. I was wondering what I could possibly do about it when I suddenly remembered something from the past. Not too long ago, I remember Rachel saying that she had lost something from her house, and that I was also an expensive luxury item. At that time, she said that she may have misplaced it or lost it herself, but she couldn't go file a police report. But now that I think about it, Karen was here yesterday too, wasn't she? Could it be that she was the one using that room? This woman named Karen is someone who had been pinpointed as what you would call the problem child out of the group of moms. I heard stories about other moms saying that she came over and they had missing items from their house as well. You're right, she was here, and I have a feeling I remember seeing her going into that room, but how could I possibly prove that she took anything? That's a good point. If there's an heirloom from your grandmother and grandfather, it must be a pretty vintage item, right? That's why I don't think that if she took it, she would use it. So maybe that she might be thinking of trying to sell it somewhere. No way! If she sells it off somewhere, then I'll never be able to get them back. There might be one of the other moms who follows Karen on the resale shop sites, so I'm going to take a look into it. After I said that, Rachel and I split up the work, messaged all of the other moms to see if anybody might know of Karen's account on any of the resale shop items. And we were able to track down her resale account, and when we looked at the product that she put up for sale, just as we expected, we found Rachel's grandparents' heirlooms. That was all the evidence we needed, so we headed straight towards Karen's house to confront her about this. Hey, Karen, you stole the heirlooms from Rachel's house, didn't you? Look at this. This is proof.
What are you saying? Those are my belongings. Stop accusing people of things that sound awful. And more than anything, you don't have any actual proof, so you can't make that up.
If you're going to ask for proof, then I have it. My grandfather's hand watch is the one and only item that has a serial number engraved into it. And of course, I have that serial number memorized. So, can I see it right now? Of course, there's no way that Karen knew about that. And so, she had a pained look on her face before she sat back down.
Oh, shut up! You're rich anyway, so what's the big deal about losing 1 or 2 items?
Those gems. And that are my grandmother and grandfather's heirlooms. Take them down immediately. I can't believe you would be able to take advantage of Rachel, who provided such an amazing evacuation site for everybody in the middle of a disaster.
When I said that, Karen got even more angry.
Oh, every single time you're always trying to show off how rich you are. I've never liked you ever since I met you. Fine, I'll give it back. You'll be happy, right? I'll give it back to you then.
And she said that. Karen went into her room and brought out the gems and watch that she had stolen, and she practically threw them at Rachel.
There you go. We're done now. Right then? Hurry up and leave.
I can't believe that she was speaking to Rachel like that. But just as I was about to open my mouth, Rachel shook her head at me. She told me that now that she had the things back, it was fine, and asked us to leave. I was furious, but since Rachel was the actual victim here, she was the one that was saying that I couldn't say anything back. However, a couple days later, Karen was about to get hit heavily by karma. To our disbelief, not only had she stolen jewels and the watch, we found out that the people who had destroyed Rachel's room were actually Karen's children. Even though on that day, Rachel provided everybody with a safe evacuation place, and Karen heard that Rachel's house had become an evacuation spot, she decided on her own hands that Rachel was bragging to everyone about how rich she was, and to make herself feel better, she destroyed the bathroom and she demanded that her children to make it cover the bedroom with mud. However, the kids felt really bad about it. They couldn't hold it in any longer, and they spoke to the sweet grandma and grandpa about it. That reached her husband, and Karen's evil actions were all found out by her family, and she was cornered by both her parents and his parents. Eventually, she showed up to Rachel's house with her husband to her parents to apologize. At that time, I heard that they enclosed plenty of money in the envelope and apologized for the whole ordeal. As for Karen's parents, they were also so embarrassed and got down on their knees to apologize that even though Rachel had provided an evacuation place for the community, that they were embarrassed that this is how their daughter was thanking her. Apparently, even the children were crying and they apologized. The husband was furious that she used her own children in her own evil plan, and he ended up getting a divorce from Karen. Apparently, he got full custody and told her that he's never going to let her see the kids again. I heard that Karen didn't want to agree to the divorce, but he really did legally file for divorce, and she was kicked out of the house. Karen was also disowned by her own parents, and she had no choice but to move into a now sometimes I see her dragging her feet around town meals on sale from a convenience store. I don't have a millimeter of sympathy for Karen, who took advantage of somebody else's kindness and smeared mud all over it.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.